coming. Merry Christmas to both of you. It's really unusual to be able to have a conversation like this, which is really unfortunate. A conversation with a Democrat and Republican. You are friends, as I said. You genuinely work together. But I want to talk about what it's like for you on Capitol Hill these days. It really feels like a hostile work environment and that things are reaching a boiling point.
It's pretty toxic. There's no question about it. I mean, just before we adjourned, probably for the Christmas break, one of our members had their words taken down. Usually you just apologize. You just say, you know what, I was wrong, and you just sit down and life goes on. And no, he couldn't speak the rest of the day. I mean, he stood by the words that he had, but, we've got metal detectors now going on the House floor. We get really nasty threats at home. The tone gets, tougher and tougher. It's a pretty toxic place. I've never seen anything like this before.
Well, you mentioned the threats, so I want to talk about that. I don't want to start off on such a negative tone, but since you mentioned it, and then we're going to talk about some of the positive stuff that's going on, because there really is. But Congresswoman Dingell, I know you had some pretty nasty voicemails last month. You've had some recently. We're going to play one, but I actually want to warn our viewers that it is a bit disturbing.
You goddamn old senile. You're as old and ugly as Biden. You ought to get the off the planet. You foul. They ought to try you for treason. You and every one of your scumbag friends. I hope your family dies in front of you. I pray to God, if you got any children, they die in your face.
I've been getting those for a couple of years.
Oh, terrible.
A couple of years?
A couple of years, ever since at Christmas time. The Christmas, right after John had died, President Trump was in Michigan.
John, your late
John
husband.
was my late husband. And once you're in that Trump hate tunnel, you kind of don't escape it. There are a lot of good people out there who are really wonderful to me, et cetera, but we average several of those a week. And, we're used to it. My friends look at me, I play them, and it's almost like therapy, and say, how can you do this? But you have to, we got to be careful not to normalize it, but I'm not going to not do my job. I'm not going to go out and not be with people. I'm not going to go out and not listen to them. I want the American people to think about what's happening in our country, that this kind of hate, this fear is happening in communities across the country. If you even look at the horrific shooting that killed children in our state, they were living with parents that were reflecting. He was living with parents that had some of that. We need to really worry about our democracy and find a way that you can disagree with people and do it in a civil and agreeable way. And it really does have me very worried.
The day before Parkland, I was meeting with one of my high schools. Until COVID, I went to a school literally every week. And I was speaking at a high school with 300 or 400 kids there, and they had a live shooter drill, something that never happened when I was in school. Then we had Parkland. Within a couple days, we all sort of changed our schedules. We focused on school violence. Debbie actually came over to my district, and I went to hers as well. And we met with law enforcement and pastors and school officials and kids. Kids can't learn in an unsafe environment. And, that's where we are today. I mean, what happened in Michigan a couple weeks ago now has now triggered copycats like that. So we've had a number of schools across our state that have been closed all over because of some of the threats. One of them in my district by an 8-year-old.
So are you connecting the toxic environment on a national political level to what you're seeing on a local level?
Yes.
Yeah.
The House of Representatives is a representative body. It represents the people. Now, what I do want to say is that there are a lot of good people that are worried about our country. So I don't want to be all negative here. I have people every day that come up from when I'm in the grocery store, when I'm at the farmer's market, when I'm in schools. Fred and I are both known for being out and about when we're home. and they come up and thank me for doing the job. Or they talk about an issue. We're Fred and Debbie. We don't want to be anything but Fred and Debbie, included for you, Dana. And people talk to us, but there is a lot of fear and hatred and people scared about what's going to happen to themselves. And we need to listen to each other more, and we need to, if you look at de Tocqueville, who came over in the early 1800s and talked about the strength of democracy, it was community. And we got to remind ourselves in community that coming together really is the pillar of our
It was a reminder when Bob Dole passed away. I mean, I worked for Bob Dole. I worked in his office, and it was a whole different climate back then. I mean, you know that, and it was a reminder to all of us that, how do we get the trains to run on time? How do we work together, be maybe disagree on issues, but not be disagreeable? And that's, he had the best wit, but he got things done. I mean, he had wonderful relationships with either Republicans or Democrats down at the White House, or certainly with his colleagues in both the House and the Senate.
You mentioned the Bob Dole, and the funeral really was a reminder, as we unfortunately have seen a fair amount recently, when people of great stature who were part of the Washington or political climate of yesteryear pass away. I want to ask you, Congresswoman Dingell, about a moment that we're going to put up. You and Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, you're putting your head on her shoulder. You actually agree on January 6th. You don't agree on much, but talk about that moment.
Look, Bob Dole was a friend. And it was a friend of John's. They were World War II veterans. Can't tell you how many issues they worked on. Bob Dole recovered in Battle Creek, Michigan. John had known him since the 50s. And I was sad. I mean, I'll tell you a story I haven't told anybody. Elizabeth called me. I may have told you at the time.
Elizabeth Dole.
Elizabeth Dole, Bob Dole's wife, called me right after John had died and been buried. And both of our husbands wanted to be buried at Arlington. And both Elizabeth and I know that being buried at Arlington, we did not get any special favors. I better say that right now. But by their Army service, they were both eligible to be, because they're World War II veterans, were eligible to be buried in Arlington. But Elizabeth asked me a lot of questions about what to do when Bob died. We were people that loved our husband and loved our community. And I, by the way, have known Liz Cheney since she was a kid. She went to school with some of John's kids. And it was a time that, I can have very strong disagreements, even with Fred, over some policy issues, probably have more serious policy issues.
I'll always make her laugh at the end.
I know, and probably have more policy
We need
issues.
more laughter in this town.
We have it.
But something that is certainly not a laughing matter, and something that I know you both feel strongly about, is January 6th. And when I say feel strongly about it, it's getting the actual facts out there. And at the end of this year, we have learned some really startling information, or at least it's remarkable to see the words, about some of the hosts on Fox News and the messages that they were sending to Mark Meadows that reveal that they understand that January 6th was terrible, despite the lies that they continue to tell to their viewers on the air. What does it mean to you as a Republican that this whitewashing is happening of January 6th?
I was there. I mean, I was not in the chamber when they were pounding and the woman was shot and killed. I had been passed through the chamber earlier that day. They asked us specifically not to be on the House floor just because of the COVID restrictions, so I was in my office. But I have a balcony, and I watched people go down the mall, and I saw them come back, and I heard the noises, and obviously was watching what happened. But it was real and shocking. And
so is it shocking to you that so many Republicans now are being told it wasn't what you saw?
You remember the conversation that's been recanted a good number of times when Kevin McCarthy called the president and said, call the troops off, stop this stuff. And the response was along the lines, I guess they care more about the election than you do, Kevin. I mean, it was a scary day. And that's why I voted to have an independent commission. We passed it in the House. Good number of Republicans supported it. It didn't happen in the Senate.
So let's end on a positive note. We do have the both of you here. You